Welcome to A Grief Observed. I'm your host, Kevin Weaver, and today I have with me on our program Steve Taylor and Dennis Lynn. It's interesting because we're doing things just a little bit different today. And I invited Dennis because he's an artist and I wanted basically a creative perspective to join me on the show today. And Steve happened to be in the studio, so we almost literally lassoed him, hogtied him, and set him down here. So I'm sure that most folks know you guys, but why don't you, Dennis, you go first, kind of tell everybody a little bit about yourself. What Dennis is famous for in Jello are the two guys playing cards down in, what do you call that park?
Festival Marketplace.
Festival Marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, go ahead, Dennis, right now. The next 60 seconds are yours.
Yeah, well, it was the original version that I
yeah.
did. I did consulting work on the second one, and it was produced in the Foundry. I've lived in Jello since 1992, and done a fair amount of work around town.
You know, that's the year that my family moved to Jello. As a matter of fact, Dennis and I met on how old were the kids? Were they in third grade or fourth grade?
Yeah.
We were on a field trip with our kids, and we went down to, I think, the Phoenix Zoo.
Yeah.
We were the only two adult males on the bus, and so we really formed a very unique friendship since then. And of course, I know many of you know Steve Taylor. He's Mr. Art Color Extraordinaire. I mean, your stuff is all over town.
Well, it's been a joy for me to be able to still do some painting and some murals and so forth. And
Well, painting and murals and Mountain Saddle Band and
Yeah.
traveling the country on tours and amazing. And, give yourself a little plug. He's got a book of poetry and his paintings.
Well, that's true. It should be available locally within the month. It's called An Old Pair of Boots, and based on a poem that I wrote when the band was on our way up to Kamloops, British Columbia. And we were doing a house concert in Stevensville, Montana, and there was a coffee cup there that had a picture of an old pair of boots on it and some commentary about that. Anyway, something silly. Anyway, I got my notepad out, and here's what came. Sometimes I feel like an old pair of boots, all wrinkled and pert near wore out, run down at the heel with a hole I can feel and a look that'd make a man pout. Now when I look for my boots at breaking of day with comfort first thing on my mind, it's the old ones I pick and slip 'em on real quick and leave the new ones behind. So in spite of the wear and the loss of our hair, I think it would be a good deal if us tired old coots were like an old pair of boots. The worse we looked, the better we'd feel.
Bravo. Clap for him, Ron. Ron's wiggling his fingers. Actually, that's how you clap in sign language.
Yeah.
Well, this fits in perfectly because when I first started with hospice, how I dealt with my grief, and truthfully, being brand new to hospice and working with people who were dying and had died, honestly, I used to personalize and visualize everything. Mm-hmm. And I had to find a way to vent and express and kind of get away from that, because really it can make you not only emotionally but physically ill. Mm. And so this is just a collection that I put together, a little self-publishing, not fancy like Steve there, because he's the real thing. But this is based on conversations that I had with people who were dying. And so they said a few different things, and I'd run out to my car, like you said, with my little notebook and put a little verse to it. So the method to my madness, the idea behind what I want to do today with you creative guys is, I want to read a little bit of some of the verses to you and kind of get your comments. How do they apply? I mean, it was such a perfect segue. The old boots, the older they get, I'm with you. I don't run for my newest pair of shoes.
No.
I run for the oldest pair. They all broken in. And so this might and you guys just chime in, but this might fit you, and certainly this area, Steve. Was an Old Cowboy that I spent some time with. And for those who know me best, there ain't nothing cowboy about me. I come from a small town in New York, but still New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I entitled this, An Old Cowboy Getting Closer to the Ground. There's nobody closer to the ground than an old cowboy. A real one, I mean. Hard-working, plain talking, living no dream. Trading for hay, BS in the day, herding and branding, letting a good horse lead the way. Sun up till sunset, chicken feathers and lice, drinking beer and brawls, thinking about girls who ain't nice. Got no religion, just an old heathen. Care about my neighbors, practice not preaching, just an old cowboy getting closer to the ground.
Mm.
Personify it. Put your... talk about it. I mean, life passing us by. And many things that we lament over, we long, we yearn for.
Yeah.
And then there are some of us, we just live that life and no regrets at the end, just being real, true to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it makes me stop and think about my past, and I won't share it all with you, but life from the time I trusted the Lord at the age of 15, and that was
100 years ago.
63 years ago, March 15th, 1955, okay, and but I drifted away and wandered in the wilderness for quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of things that were part of my life I would like to forget. But thankfully, the Lord has forgiven me, but I still can't forget those things.
Yeah.
And you kind of carry them with you. And so, like one situation where I had an uncle that had molested us as little children, and I carried that with me until about 2 or 3 years ago, when I finally turned it over to the Lord, and it was like a great burden had been lifted from my shoulders that I didn't even know was there. And because it was just with me all the time.
Right.
And I had to forgive him, though he had passed away.
Right.
And I did that through the Lord and felt relief as a result. So,
Wow. Well, that's quite profound, Steve. Thank you for making yourself so vulnerable and sharing.
yeah.
You know, we think oftentimes that, you know, in speaking of grief and grief recovery is, you know, I've lost a loved one or I've lost something, but something that this close and personal, thank you. That'll help a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So your faith has entered the picture. You know, of course, I've known Dennis all these years, and he too is a man of faith. And, you know, we've been through some difficult times, or saw their family weather some real difficult times.
Yeah.
What say you, Dennis, to the place of your faith in those journeys?
Well, in the perspective of the poem that you read, I find it interesting that the author, or well, the man speaking,
Mm-hmm.
refers to himself as a heathen, and yet he says that he always looked after his neighbors and stuff like that. I think we see ourselves differently than the
Yeah.
outside world does.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's a quote I heard once that said to go out in the world and preach the gospel wherever you go, and when necessary, use words.
Oh, there you go.
And so I think that our lives speak volumes of our true faith. I think sometimes there are people that really are believers. They just don't believe they're believers.
Yeah.
And so this is a very profound thing, really, what he's saying in the poem, that he just doesn't see the goodness in himself. but I think other people read that in us. You can't hide goodness.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a light, and it shines through the cracks, and we all have cracks.
Yeah.
Wow. Excellent insight.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, again, speaking of the simplicity, the things that, again, I'm not against rituals, creed, dogma, all those things, but they can just be things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when we reduce it to the simplicity, like Dennis said, we kind of, we really don't see ourselves as others do. And when we reduce it to just the simple places.
Right.
Yeah. When I'm talking to people at hospice and they tell me that I really have no religion, no spiritual background, I immediately try to bring them back to what I refer to as the God of their youth.
Mm-hmm.
How were you raised as a child? Did
Right.
you go to church? And then the lights begin to go on. Oh yeah, I remember. And to me, there's nothing more spiritually or religiously profound than that place where I first believed. I can take you there, both in my mind and physically, that place where I first was baptized, and it meant so much. You guys got those places?
Yeah. The Rock River in Rockford, Illinois.
Rock River and Rockford, Illinois. That just sounds like a place to be baptized.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. And I was 15, almost 16 years old, and the church I was attending at the time used the river for their baptistry, and so anyway, yeah, I remember that. Well, one thing that we didn't know about the Rock River at that time, and of course that's where we went swimming and fishing and all of that stuff, was that South Beloit, Wisconsin was pumping a lot of sewage into it that was running down through town. Found that out later. But anyway.
Well, why this is important is because for me, in dealing with grief and different issues and what I'm hearing you guys say, and for many, is I have to have these reference points, these places that I can go back to, these places that have become moorings, because that's what I turn to get me through to the next leg of the journey.
Those are landmarks.
Landmarks.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like when you hear the stories of when someone faces death and their life flashes before them. Those are the chapter illustrations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Flashing before them.
Chapter illustrations. That's great.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I decided I've got some more I'm going to put to this. So maybe one of you guys could give me some chapter illustrations. What would it cost me? No, that's a good point. Chapter illustrations. Because, I remember as a kid reading, and I didn't really like to read, but of course I would always find a book that had lots of illustrations, and you couldn't wait to get to the illustration.
Yeah.
And because it just summed it up. And you could look at that illustration if it was done right, and you could get it. Yeah. And that's such a good way of looking at it, because that's what we hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of progress through this journey.
Yeah.
And we're all illustrators. We illustrate our own life, and our actions, our words, and how we live is our illustrations.
Yeah. So very true. So very true. And we're each writing and creating, illustrating those along the way.
Yeah.
And for me and for many, the religious experiences, I don't know, they tend to highlight the areas that I need to cling to, or that become so much more profound and so much more vivid.
And you have to remember too that we don't. I don't think we enter religion. I don't think we enter into us. I think we're visited by the spiritual.
Amen.
I think it enters our lives at some point. And for me, I was probably only 5 or 6 years old, but I remember having a very, very profound love for the Christ child as a baby, as kind of like at my own age, kind of a thing, even younger, and and it was just a thing that came into my life. It just filled me. It was it's hard to describe spirit.
Yeah, I understand perfectly what you're saying. Of course, I was raised in church, and that's all I've ever known. But again, it was never anything that I was looking for. It just kind of happened one day. Like you said, it's like it came to me, or it really drew me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was something about it. We're about halfway through our show today, and this one kind of takes a little bit of a different twist. But of course, along the lines of grief recovery and this man thinking out loud, and not just thinking out loud, but this is something that happened. It's entitled The Pact of Love, and it's a letter, and he's writing this to his deceased wife. And he said, "My dearest darling, we made a decision to die together. We made a pact, a covenant between us, an agreement sealed with blood. We would share our end together, not waiting on chance, a soul-knit bond, a pact of love. We agreed, swallow quickly, leave no note. You go first," said I, "or if you want to, follow me. We loved each other these 60 years still. We know they won't agree. You insisted on going first, so I watched. Your breathing became shallow, then your breathing stopped. Your lips turned blue, your eyes sank hollow. Then it was my turn. I quickly swallowed the agreed upon dose. But I was caught by our daughter. We were so close. Now here am I, sick and sad and suffering life all alone. I'm mad at the world, and I'm sorry, my dearest darling. They made me stay. They don't understand. We just wanted to go home." You know, as we age, there's a lot of sadness. We've been encouraged through hospice to find ways to help people with their sadness. I don't know if you can help someone with sadness. It's almost like, I mean, we want to intervene when something's wrong, but being sad, there's nothing wrong. Now I don't advocate for euthanasia, assisted suicide. I'm not an advocate of that. But these people were at the end of their life and sad. 60 years of marriage, and everything was over, from the loss of driver's licenses to the ability to even shower themselves. They were sad. How do we intervene? How do we reach out to the person that, I mean, not depressed, just sad. And they just, in their sadness together, they agreed that let's just go. Let's do this. Your thoughts?
Well, that's a hard one to think about,
Yeah,
Kevin. And
but the realities are there.
I know, and you wonder how long is it going to be before we deal with the same
Exactly.
situation in life, the same time of life when we're close to passing and so forth. And my feeling is now, since I'm not at that point yet,
Right.
that if I have, since I have trusted the Lord, that He will give me the strength and the comfort and the peace to deal with Joanne passing first or me passing first.
Right.
Because whoever's left, the Lord still has a plan for that individual. It's not my job to help her go away or
Right.
for her to help me go away. We're here because the Lord brought us here, and He has a plan for us. And when it's our time to go home to Him, then that's up to Him, but not up to me.
So that's the point of this program, A Grief Observed. is that hopefully some out there who may identify with what I just read can find some solace or some comfort or some strength, hope in the words. Because I think that when we get to these points in our life, we're certainly all going to consider.
Yeah.
But I like what you said. We're not any of us without a plan. And that kind of springboards from what you said, Dennis, when with the religion or the spirituality, there was that something that pulled me to it. That I think that spirit is, maybe we could say, that's the plan.
Yeah.
You've got to, allow yourself to be taken or pulled to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think sadness is something that needs to be treated. I think it's something that has to be lived.
Yeah.
Sadness, a lot of people will do whatever they can to make a person stop feeling sad. But the sadness is that valley that they have to walk through. They have to get through it, just like we have to get through the flu to get better.
Right.
But you build up antibodies, and the next time you're stronger for it. The sadness it's not just a physical thing, it is also a spiritual thing.
Yeah, and that brings me in my mind to a good point, is because I'm often asked for funerals, memorials, and such, should we allow the children? This might be too much for them, too overwhelming. We don't want them to be sad. But you're right, it is a natural and healthy part. When we're children, we're sad. When I went over to my boys' house early this morning, and their uncle was there, and he said, last night, Jaden and Logan, they were both sobbing because they were on vacation, and they had left a little pet fish in some type of a container. Well, the friend that was looking over the house for them emptied out the container, put it away, but the little fish was left stuck to the side of the container. So they came home and they're sad.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's okay. So we don't need to try to take the sadness away. Embrace it, support it, teach and instruct through it. But yeah, it's a part of life and the experiences that we have to have.
Yeah.
You're right, Dennis. It's not something that has to be treated. It has to be experienced, so that those grief antibodies build and form, so that when we get to this place, we have enough maybe reserve to pull from. Yeah. Well, I'm going to lighten the mood as we're speeding out of time here. This is called Jello Heaven. I'm looking for a Jello heaven, a place where I can feel secure. A cherry and lime and lemon heaven, a place where boundaries are sure. A jiggly wiggly chilled heaven, a place of delightful refreshment. A simple and easy to read heaven, a place alive with enchantment. A lick smacking good heaven, a place where all children are loved. A belly rubbing satisfied and full heaven, a place to belong, a place to call home.
Amen. Yeah.
We have to have hope, you guys.
Yeah.
And I think I knew that this would be really a cool session with you two guys. We need to do this again, maybe with some of your poetry, maybe with some others. Because, again, this stuff comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
And how we deal with it is to encourage one another, to offer one another hope. Any concluding thoughts? You each got 30 seconds.
Well, this has been a real treat for me.
Oh.
And to think of the
Yes.
fact that I was called yesterday to come in and do some voiceovers.
Yeah.
And this seemed to be the right time to do it while my wife was in therapy. And you happened to be here. And we couldn't have made that plan.
No, not
No.
at all.
I
not
think
at
the
all.
Lord put it together.
I think so, too.
And yeah, that's how I feel
It's
about
going
it.
to help some folks.
It was a blessing to me.
Thanks, Steve. Dennis?
I, that thought just flew away.
That's
wait.
my job.
When you break it all down, the looking forward to going to heaven part, that's going towards love, and God is love.
Amen.
And really, our choice is very simple. Do we want love or the absence of? And that's what the two places you can go to are.
Well, and with that, again, a wonderful segue into, is this where the wind goes? This person thought, I never thought about it that way. At the end, the wind goes only one way, the way of love. Thanks for joining us today on A Grief Observed, and we will see you next month.